Hi, everybody. Welcome to A2IM Indie Week. And we're going to have a panel discussion today around what work environments will look like after the year and a half that we've just been through. Thank you to A2IM for inviting us all for this conversation. I'm Molly Newman. I'm the president of Songtrust, and I have a long time connection to A2IM. I was a founding board member. And, all of these years later, so proud of what the organization has become, and, really appreciate the chance to have the indie community facilitate this conversation, because I think some of the most interesting ideas and innovative thoughts on all parts of culture come from independence. And we have some incredible guests today. So I'd love to give everybody the chance to introduce themselves, and maybe you could share your favorite or least favorite thing that you've had to adjust to over this past year and a half. And if you could, share your title and your experience, and maybe what city you're in right now. I'm in New York. We can start with Joe.
Hi, I'm Jo Holder. I'm head of people and culture at Warp Records. I started in the pandemic, so I started in December 2020, which you can probably hear from my accent. I'm based in the UK, but in a little city. Probably people already won't know where it is. It's about an hour from London, and an hour from the coast, so it's like in between both. And
Nice.
what was I going to say? And so I'm based in the UK, but I look after UK and US employees as well. And it's like a bit of both. My favorite and least favorite thing is working from home. I think like there's so many benefits to it, because I think it's this time has really shifted people's perceptions of what working from home is, and like how productive you can actually be. And I think there used to be this kind of assumption that you would just dot about and like have a nap, or like just lay on the couch or whatever and just binge watch TV. But actually, like, the output, especially from our business, I know from other businesses, has been the same, if not better, of people being in the office. And it's really helped with us in terms of like UK and US collaboration, because that prejudice before of like the US always being on video calls compared to the UK team that were always in the office, like that's disappeared. But then the least favorite thing, the negatives of that are sometimes it takes a lot of time to get things done, and like you miss that kind of like water cooler chat and like being able to build relationships that way and like get things done a lot quicker. I think like you've consciously got to like have a phone call now or have a Zoom, all that kind of stuff. So my bits of both, really.
That's great. So thank you. Amadea?
Yeah, so I'm Amadea. I'm the COO at PEX. We're a digital rights technology company building infrastructure so that rights holders and artists can monetize and license their content in real time on all UGC platforms on the internet. And I would say, and I'm in LA. And I would say my favorite and least favorite aspect is maybe not having a commute anymore. In a way, I'm really happy to have that 1 hour back every day and spend more time with family during that time. But at the same time, I really miss listening to music and podcasts for half an hour and being unreachable for that time to kind of set my day onwards. That's me.
Moses?
Hi, I'm Moses Balian. I'm an HR consulting manager at Justworks, coming to you from Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. Justworks is a software-driven payroll, benefits, and HR compliance solutions service with a strong emphasis on like employee experience. That's kind of our jam. My favorite part about the pandemic is I'd say I have far fewer but far deeper relationships with my colleagues. So as where before I might have interacted with 50 people on a given day on a relatively shallow level, now I have like 5 really close colleagues that I talk to often, who I've developed much more meaningful and vulnerable relationships with, and I've enjoyed that a lot. My least favorite has probably been the dissociation between like doing certain activities and the space in which you do them. Like, I know we're talking to a lot of musicians. You might have had a room where you played guitar, or like where the piano was, and that's what you did in that room. And then in COVID,
Right.
it had to become your office. And so what used to be fun now is like dual fun and work, and probably like is a bit of a buzzkill when you pick up your guitar. So that's been a struggle.
Yeah, I get that. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Stanley. My company is called Thoughts in Order, and I'm in Austin, Texas, the live music capital of the world. Still, we hope it will continue to be as music comes back. And my work is very specific. I help music professionals to be organized. So I help them in the realm of time management, data management, systems, projects, strategizing, to manage the business side of their independent music career, whether they're artists or industry professionals. My favorite part, far and away, has been learning to work virtually. I should say everyone else learning to work virtually. I've been doing it since way before it was cool. And the hardest part was being able to persuade clients that it was a legitimate modality to work versus in person. And particularly with one-on-one consulting, people want to have an in-person conversation, but the trade-off now is that I'm available to any English speaker anywhere in the world. My only limitation is that I only speak one language. So that has been a really great advantage, and I'm glad that it's been normalized now, that this might not always be the ideal way to meet, but it certainly can be highly functional. And my least favorite part, far and away, has been the devastation of live music. What I've seen happen to my clients who, they've lost so profoundly in so many areas. We might think of financially first, but they've lost in self-actualization, in creativity. For artists who thrive in a live environment where they're exchanging energy in person with an audience, they just didn't have that. And that was vicariously traumatizing for me to see. And it was a lot to carry for them. So I've been spending the year trying to help them to, just hold on until we can get back to performance. And it's starting to come back now. And so that's a huge relief.
Well, I mean, I think you all touched on such poignant themes that I think affect really are universal. And I appreciate that we're coming from, beside, Moses and I are in different parts of New York, but we have so many time zones reflected, and there are so many, independent companies and independent creators around the world who are, experiencing all different dimensions of these challenges. But it is, there have been these positives, there have been these silver linings, and then there have been these ongoing, extreme, painful challenges. And I appreciate very much that you all can share your perspectives and give our audience, thoughts and suggestions and new tactics for how they might consider operating in the sort of post-pandemic environment. I'm coming to you from our offices. We've been open since last summer in very strict protocols for availability. Hopefully those will be expanding and more people will feel comfortable. But these are things that all of us are going through. And I wanted to open with a question to you, Joe. So I know you're relatively new in your role at Warp, but managing a team globally, I just wonder if you could offer some suggestions of what's required to manage a team, and what surprised you about how the team has responded to maybe these new structures or new protocols that you're trying to put in order.
Yeah, I think it's the understanding that people learn in different ways, and I think like the realization that people have different learning styles, so whether that's like some people are more visual, some people are more process, some people are more like collaborative, and some people just need it all written down. I think like that's become a lot more apparent because you're not all together, and people have to kind of speak up, if maybe more so than before, if they don't understand something or need to go through something with their team. I think the fact that you have like managers have to over communicate more now than they used to,
Right.
and like and otherwise that you know, can get like things can get lost in translation, I think. But yeah, I think kind of on the flip side, like I said previously, we really noticed like the increase in collaboration between our UK and US team, because that prejudice towards like people being in the head office, which is London, and being all together has been removed, because people are at home and like everybody's equal and on the same level. And I think the struggle for us now is how we like readjust back to the workplace and like keep that and everybody's
Right.
like on the same level. I think I think that is going to be the struggle, and we're working through how we do that. And I think it's potentially more one-on-ones and more face-to-face in the office, but like group, what me and the label head are kind of working on is for like kind of more group brainstorming meetings. Even if people are in the office, they dial in from a desk, or they dial in room, like they don't all sit in a meeting room together and then have the US like on a separate video call, or everybody that's in the US on separate video calls. It's like you're all dialing in separately, because that meeting etiquette is so important. And people being mindful, and also like people being mindful of it's ensuring that the meeting stops when like everybody's logged off, because you know there's that habit of like the meeting can still continue like once everybody's logged off, like great, thanks guys, like see you later. And then you sort of go one-on-one, oh actually like maybe we should do that, and then that person that's in the room gets preference. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think the fact that even if people are in the office, but for like brainstorming team meetings they're dialing in separately is one way to hopefully alleviate that.
I agree. I mean, I wonder if any of the others have had this experience, but certainly our remote teams in month one all said, now you know what it feels like. And that what you described of sort of making that the consistent, everyone at their desk dialing in to have a bit more of the, sort of equal access seems like a really logical and thoughtful way to approach it. Amadea, I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned your commute already, and we're struggling right now, I think, a bit with thinking about what our teams want to do, how if they want to come in, some do, some maybe not as much. How are you all thinking you might operate after a little bit more stability?
So we've actually fully leaned into the remote environment. I think so. We were set up in different city hubs before the pandemic hit. So we had people in LA, Boulder, New York, and Prague. And so when the pandemic hit, and we also saw how differently it was going in the different hubs that we had, we kind of very quickly realized that we would be in this for the long haul, and we wouldn't be able to have people back in an office for probably a year or so. So maybe after a month or so of the pandemic, we decided to announce that we would go fully remote for indefinitely, and enable that for our employees. And so it also gave a sense of stability that I think the companies that were maybe going to go back to an office office like in a month, in 2 weeks, and oh no, actually we're back at home. I think that that was destabilizing. So I think we try to have that stability. So so fully remote now, I think we're definitely craving some in-person connection with our colleagues. So as soon as I think Europe can be done with the vaccinations and travel across borders can reopen, we'll be definitely looking to probably schedule an offsite so that everyone can get together. We also hired 40 people or so during the pandemic. And so those people have, they don't know how tall I am, or so it'll be really nice to finally, get together with everyone. But I think that's kind of going to be the new normal, is everyone remote, but with offsites every 6 months or so, where we can all get together and work on building this like a trust relationship, because I think so much of a good remote work environment is built on having a very solid trust foundation, and that can be a little bit hard to build over Zoom. We put in place little we have like a Slack channel with a question of the day where we take turns in asking kind of something a little bit personal, and people can chime in and give a little bit of their personal opinion about these things, and that helps to build the culture and create that water cooler effect that we're missing on a day-to-day basis. And then the other thing that I think is really important is having this emphasis on good communication and transparency. And I think what that means exactly is a really important question, because transparency is not just making every document available to everyone. It's not just writing it in one place and saying it was communicated. So we're finding that things have to be communicated multiple times in multiple different means to kind of ensure that it gets to everyone and that it's understood in the same way by everyone. So achieving real transparency is definitely a key focus for us.
That's wonderful. And I think that for the model that you all are adopting, the in-person experiences, yeah, they might need more planning and more organization and more thoughtfulness, but we can expect that the outcomes could yield, just as much, if not more, because of that, as a deliberate, intentional effort, right? I mean, that's, I think, one of the great opportunities. It's, as leaders of companies, you all are putting that commitment there, and I think that your teams will likely respond. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And Moses, you see all kinds of companies, and you're seeing all the tactics that they've employed to make it through this time, and I imagine some new ideas. The A2IM community is large and international, and I'm sure would welcome some inspiration, along the lines of what Warp and PEX are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So as an HR consultant, I work with a few hundred of the thousands and thousands of customers of Justworks, providing HR best practices, guidance, and certainly this culture conversation around the intra and post-pandemic work environment has been a huge component of that conversation lately. I don't think, this is a very HR diplomatic answer, but I don't think there are any or very few single ideas that can be categorically labeled as good ideas or bad ideas universally for any company. It's really going to depend on the nature of your business and sort of your existing culture. So for example, for a good deal of companies, it's going to be a great idea to go fully remote after COVID. It affords a greater degree of work-life balance. It promotes a results-oriented working environment, generally more flexibility. And a lot of people were looking to maybe make a geographic move anyway, and can now, which is very exciting for a lot of people. That's going to be a bad idea for a company that just simply can't operate as successful that way. Many can. And it's not even a matter of like a office worker divide and like those who like have a physical component of their job that they need to be there for. There's plenty of office workers where the remote work environment might not be super well suited. Like I was reading in an article in the Times about some toy company where colleagues needed to come in and like play with, like for children, like toys, like play with prototypes with their colleagues to just kind of workshop it and see what changes need to be made. That's such a great and like whimsical example of where the remote work environment could be devastating. I think though for a great many workers, it has had a positive impact. Someone earlier talked about the role that managers, how active of a role they play in workflow management. I think, you know, a lot of managers have had to become more hands-on. I now have 2 one-on-ones with my manager a week instead of 1, for example. She drives one of them, I drive the other. It's a cool dynamic.
That's
so
great.
we talk more, and my relationship with her has deepened, and I've like sort of our mentorship her mentorship of me has flourished, not as more than just task delegation, which is awesome. But so yeah, that has been one benefit of the remote working environment. And for other people who aren't as extroverted, for other types of roles that might feel a little overbearing, right? Maybe people don't, you know, have those longer term projects, and to humor their manager with another check-in is more of an impediment than it is a benefit. So again, this really depends on the nature of the work and the culture of the company. Another idea that could be good or bad is I think there is a pretty tremendous diversity potential amidst the remote work environment, where now we can hire individuals across far more diverse geographies that maybe before couldn't have afforded to already be living in one of the great cities where there are more plentiful and more skilled job opportunities. So now we can pluck, you know, a gem who lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and offer them a position at my New York-based software company. This is great. Where this will work for companies is where they have the budget to do that, and to, I think, pay people generally in parity with wherever their like most expensive job market is already, right? Because where that might not work is now you're seeking out areas with lower cost of living so that you can pay lower salaries, you know, commensurate to the median. That's kind of that doesn't feel so good, and that's kind of
it goes both ways, right? You've heard conversations around people moving to more affordable places, and the employers having those, you know, those same, maybe seeking people. It's interesting.
Exactly. So these are many of the complex dynamics we have to consider now. So many more.
But I like the idea that you know, sort of, if you do end up having, and you don't, like, to your point, the frequency of 2 one-on-ones a week might be burdensome for that. There is some different ownership of who drives it, and that alternation seems like a good idea. That maybe, you know, could be attempted as a tactic of, you know, sort of like how to empower your teams if you're not able to have some of those in-person conversations. Debbie, I mean, you work with individuals who are businesses and companies, I think, as well. And, you know, I just love to sort of, you know, what kind of guidance are you trying to offer? I mean, it sounds like what you offer already is very, very appropriate for the environment that we're going through in terms of how to manage experience and creativity as well as business life. I mean, I think we could all benefit from some of those suggestions that you probably give your clients.
Yeah, it's definitely my time to shine with helping people to get organized now. Even if they were organized before, now this is a time of reorganization. And so my background is in psychology, both individual psychotherapy type psychology and also corporate psych, which is called industrial and organizational psychology. So I combine it all under the umbrella of being organized in your life, in your work, in your thinking. And there's a model that you've probably all heard of that makes it really easy to put an organized framework around it. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. And so the thing that I've noticed in the past year, a little bit more than a year, is we have seen what happens when there's a threat to the foundational level of Maslow's hierarchy for all of us. So the foundational level is our physiological needs, our health needs, and this includes mental health. So this is something that I'll always say: mental health is health, physical health is health. They're both health. They're intertwined. And so we saw the devastation at that foundational level of people either getting COVID or fearing COVID or avoiding COVID, feeling threatened by COVID, losing someone to COVID. So it was a really fascinating universal experience that we were all thrown back down to that bottom level of Maslow, and we need to build back up. So the bottom level is that health need. The next level up is safety and security. That includes, do you have a job? It includes, do you have a home? The third level up is relationships. It's, where are you getting love and belonging? And we, as an American culture at least, tend to focus on the two highest levels. The second level, the one down from the top, is esteem, recognition, what you're getting in response for your work. What is your reputation? Are you respected? And then the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy is self-actualization, where you feel like you're doing what you're here to do. You're accomplishing what you're meant to do. And the way that it's designed is, in theory, you have to accomplish each level in order. You have to have that foundation of health before you can fully have that foundation of safety and security, before you can have healthy relationships, before you can have respect and a good career, before you can self-actualize. Now, in the music industry, we see a lot of people who are trying to do it out of order, and that was the norm before. And it's understandable. It's the hustle, it's the struggle, it's the grind, right? It's a lot of people's backstory of, I am going to work on my art even though I'm living in my car. And we have respected that so much that I think we're recognizing now that we've accepted it too much, and we've failed to provide the proper supports to make sure that people do have those foundations in place. Now we all experienced this pandemic that, it was a universal experience, and we all had to react to it in some way. We now have an opportunity as a global culture to ramp up our empathy for one another, to recognize that if we think of someone as other, then we're automatically creating a barrier. And this can happen in company hierarchies. It can happen in the music industry with artists being put either on a pedestal or at the bottom as, they're just the talent, they're interchangeable. And so all of these mindsets that we had before are so much more obvious, easy to spot, and easy to change, because we've got this window that's been opened literally into our lives, where, we're communicating from our homes. We're seeing each other's children popping in. We're seeing Molly's coworkers walking behind her. We're seeing Moses' dog.
It's real life, right?
Exactly, it's real life. And so this is the guidance that I'm offering for my my business leader clients, and that includes, the leader of a band. You are the president of a business when you're a band leader. 100%. First, ramp up your empathy for that shared humanness that we all have. Recognize that, at that bottom level of Maslow, we all have human bodies that have vulnerabilities that give us responsibilities that we have to tend to. And we all noticed this when we joked about COVID hair, and we joked about being able to wear soft pants with like a dress shirt. I mean, we all get it. We need to hold on to that. There were these facades that were broken that need to stay broken. And so if we acknowledge that all of this is normal and it's part of our shared humanity, we can continue to hold that in the workplace. At that fourth level of Maslow, we're normalizing that home environments have children, they have pets, they have leaf blowers, and so this is all part of our shared humanity. If we can shore that up, taking this trauma and turning it into an opportunity, then we're better positioned to work on those higher levels of Maslow, of reinforcing our relationships at that third level, of reinforcing our ability to do good work at that second level and to be rewarded for it with esteem. And then the self-actualization is, ultimately like our sandcastle got knocked down, but we can build it back up and put an even better flag on top in the form of self-actualization if we pay attention to these foundational facets that now we have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I know in the chat we'll post links to some of these concepts for people to dive into more, because I think one of my hopes from the this conversation that we're all having is that it will inspire people to think, the A2IM membership and the attendees to think about some things that they haven't in the past. And Amadea, sort of as I think it's complementary to what Debbie was sharing and what you mentioned earlier. You've hired 40 people over the past year. And as you said, you're in multiple countries, multiple cities in the US. It's interesting to think, like, what kind of things did you immediately have to put in motion that you found super valuable? I imagine you have to onboard, I don't know what the team size was prior to that exactly, but I imagine to onboard 40 people, there's some real challenges.
Yeah, I think there's for sure been challenges, and we're still working through them. But I think what's been really interesting is kind of actually what we maybe don't do so differently across the world. I think for us, it's there is a real stance that we're taking on fairness and equity around the way that we treat our employees. So Moses mentioned earlier, but all our employees in the US are making the same salary depending on their level. All of that is transparent. It's accessible in a spreadsheet, and everyone can see what level everyone is at, and hence what their compensation is. We have American salaries and European ones to reflect, kind of those markets. But actually, there's no difference if you're living in Prague or if you're living in Norway. It's the same compensation. So that and also I would say the same level of equity, depending on people's level, which we're a technology company, so we give equity, but I think that's really important, and that's the same across continents too. So I think that's been really important in order to kind of to establish this fairness across the organization. Maybe one thing to note, and we were doing it beforehand, but I'm French myself. The founder of PEX, Rusty, is Slovak originally, but we're both living in the US. Our employees are in lots of different cities and countries. We actually just hired someone in Nigeria. And one thing that we're hyper aware of is of our cultural differences across different geographies. So the way that we communicate feedback might be different based on the way that we were taught to speak, and to, if something is good, it might be great on the West Coast, and it might be just okay in Prague, and that's how things are communicated. So I think being hyper aware of the cultural differences in our communication styles and leaning into it is really key to if for anyone looking to embrace the remote environment and hire people internationally. I think you can't diminish the importance of that.
No, that's a great reminder, and certainly, the faux pas that come up from people, using a term that is innocent enough. I think we're all more aware and thoughtful about those things in general, but now it seems even more critical with a global company and all of the harmony that you're trying to encourage. That's wonderful. Joe, I had a question. Your role at Warp is, many companies have HR and people teams, and but independent record companies, which tend to be on the smaller side or sometimes owner operated, and so the owner does all of when I had a record company, I was the HR person without much guidance. And I think it's really wonderful that Warp has you and your role. And I wonder if you could, share a little bit about it and some of the maybe tools and resources that you're building to support your team.
Yeah. It's very strange, like, because I just think you never would have thought, like, even, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, that like their first in-house HR hire has joined remotely and hasn't met, like, I've only met about 4 employees, and that was all at interview stage, because in the UK, like, things locked down really quickly in December.
Right.
And it's only really starting to open up again now. So we're only really starting to open up the office. So, like, that in itself is such a weird concept. But in terms of the team, like what I'm trying to introduce, I think it's kind of linking back to Moses and kind of his offering and what Justworks do, really, in terms of like HR, like the data and how people book vacation, and there being one place where like all the policies are, like for the UK and US employees and East and West Coast, and for where we communicate, and that's kind of like what I'm looking at doing. But then also being aware of kind of linking back to Amadea, like the cultural differences, like it happened. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a public holiday in the UK, and we have a like town hall on a Friday, and the CEO basically said to everybody, have a good May Day bank holiday, and he said, but you get it in the US, don't you? And I was like, no, they don't. It's fine, but like, and then they're all, I think it's that assumption that like everybody they have to get like the UK public holidays, and it's like no, like it's totally different. Like all of education of the cultural differences, I think is happening as well, but also trying to streamline things like where possible, and to make sure that people feel like they're in, like they are they're treated the same, but with those like cultural niches, I think.
You're just personally, I had that, Mother's Day is different days in different countries, and saying goodbye on a Friday and Happy Mother's Day for the Netherlands and the US, not for Spain, and it's a different thing. I think it's this weekend or coming up in the UK. So
it was in March. Yeah, it's always in March. Before the US, isn't it? It's like months before the US. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost at the end of our time, and hopefully everybody's been asking questions throughout. We're here to support and answer. I thought I'd sort of combine to Debbie and Moses, because you do, I think, but Amadea and Joe, you're working with your own companies, but Debbie and Moses, you see lots of different experiences, and what's the most clever thing that you're seeing people apply, or maybe that you've guided them in your case, Debbie, with your consulting? What do you see people sort of like taking on, and whether it's a personal, I think the psychological elements and tools that you are able to suggest, Debbie, I think those are wonderful things for our guests to consider, and Moses, certainly on some of the more practical day-to-day tooling that we might be able to use now. I'll start with you, Debbie.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'll go. And I'll start at the 30,000 foot level. I focus on teaching people how to develop their own strategies and tools for being organized, and that requires just being aware that you need to be organized, being aware of what's normal, where you can improve, and externalizing blame for being disorganized. So that means if you are what we call chronically disorganized, if you've always had a struggle with it, recognize that it's just a problem to be solved, that you can strategize it, you can find tools, you can find ways to organize yourself. It's not a character flaw. That's the thing that I'm constantly saying. And so my advice, as we're re-emerging from the pandemic, re-entering what will be whatever the new normal is, recognize that organizing will be even harder now, that you're going to be disoriented. And when you have that awareness, that will make it easier to sit back and say, okay, I need new strategies. Time particularly is really difficult. Time conceptualization is off for everyone. We're making the joke that there's a TV show where they said time is a flat circle. Normalizing that frees people to then reconnect with the best tools that will work for their unique minds.
Right.
Moses, what you got?
Yes,
Debbie,
perfect.
that was such a beautiful place to start. You talked about organizing one's mind. I guess I want to talk about the changes in organizations of people. And this is a very practical recommendation. That's why I went to go first, was that take a look at your
Sorry.
team bonding. I think what definitely doesn't work anymore is let's all go to the pub when we're done working. That's not inclusive for a number of reasons. It's not very inclusive of parents. It's not inclusive of people who have different kind of work streams. It's not inclusive of people who are battling addiction or have just realized that or started battling addiction amidst COVID and the isolation of the pandemic. So we really need to revisit team events and have them be purpose driven. I've had some great team events with my folks at Justworks on my own team where they're centered around some really creative activities, and the parameters that have been placed on us have resulted in some creativity. Like we did a flower arranging class last week. We practiced like calligraphy. We found someone who does calligraphy as like a stress release mechanism in therapy, like calligraphy therapy. Super cool. So there's a lot of great ideas out there where you can find activity driven bonding that still encourages conversation, and you can learn what your colleagues are good at and what they're bad at and what they're embarrassed by, and like find hidden talents. It's been a much richer experience. I think it's forced us to have to actually bond rather than just, as I said, go to the pub.
That's so great. I mean, all of the ideas and tactics and tools that you all have shared, I'm inspired by them myself. I'm going to go back and take notes and talk to my team about things that we can do, because it's, I think the core of it, the connection, communication, giving some dependable suggestions and frameworks are themes that many of you have touched on. And it really does feel like that level of thoughtfulness that we're able to give our teams is they're gonna respond. And this has been a incredible challenge for so many of us on so many levels, and I think the empathetic development that we've all had to cultivate is so important. But it is really inspiring to hear all of the things that you're doing and your companies are doing, and definitely look forward to chatting more, and maybe we can have a follow-up within 6 months or at the next Indie Week. It'd be great to hear how things are going. Thank you all for joining, and thank you again, A2IM.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I was just going to add one thing if we have time.
Yes, of course.
The best learning for me, which I'm sure Debbie would agree with, boundaries. Oh my God, boundaries is like life and like the best thing that you can try and implement. And it is a constant struggle, but boundaries. Drop the mic.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.